"You don't belong in this cabin, sir. Economy is back there." That was the mistake that ended a 20-year career in 5 seconds. The flight attendant looked at the hoodie and the skin color and saw a trespasser. He didn't realize he was speaking to the man who signed his paychecks. He denied him a meal, humiliated him in front of the elite, and laughed. But when the plane landed, the laughter stopped. This is the story of Damien Cole. The flight that changed everything, and the most brutal instant karma aviation has ever seen. The rain was hammering against the glass walls of JFK Terminal 4, turning the runway lights into smeared streaks of red and yellow. It was a miserable Tuesday night, the kind that makes everyone in an airport edgier than usual. Damien Cole stood near the boarding gate for Flight 882 to London Heathrow, rubbing his temples. He was exhausted. At 34 years old, Damien was the majority shareholder and CEO of Apex Logistics, a firm that had quietly revolutionized how freight moved across the Atlantic. He had just spent 72 hours in tense negotiations regarding the acquisition of a smaller European cargo fleet. He hadn't slept in 2 days. He hadn't showered in 24 hours. He looked rough. He was wearing a charcoal grey hoodie from a university. He'd dropped out of a pair of worn-in denim jeans and sneakers that had seen better days. He carried a battered leather rucksack that contained a laptop worth more than most cars. To the casual observer, Damien looked like a tired college student, or perhaps a backpacker scraping by on a budget. He certainly didn't look like a man holding a first-class ticket on Royal Atlantic Airways. "Now inviting first-class and Diamond Club passengers to board at Gate B12. The announcement crackled overhead. Damien adjusted his backpack and stepped toward the priority lane. He just wanted to get to seat 1A, put on the noise-cancelling headphones, and sleep until the wheels touched British soil. As he approached the podium, a gate agent named Brenda, who was busy typing furiously, didn't even look up. Damien held out his phone with the digital boarding pass. "Zone 1 only, sir," Brenda said, her voice flat. She still didn't look up. "I know," Damien said, his voice deep and raspy from fatigue. "I'm in Zone 1. Brenda finally looked up. Her eyes scanned him, the hoodie, the hair, the tired face. Her expression shifted from indifference to a tight, pinched suspicion. "This line is for first-class passengers. Economy boarding will begin in 20 minutes. Please step aside." Damien sighed. He was used to this. It was the invisible tax he paid every time he traveled dressed comfortably. He tapped his phone screen to brighten the QR code. "Scan it, please." Brenda hesitated, clearly annoyed that he wasn't obeying immediately. She snatched the scanner and aimed it at his phone, almost hoping for the angry red beep of a rejection. Beep. Green light. Seat 1A. Brenda blinked. She looked at the screen, then back at Damien, then back at the screen. There was no apology, no smile. She just pointed vaguely down the jet bridge. "Go ahead." Damien walked down the tunnel, feeling the cool air of the aircraft transition. He reached the door of the plane where the flight crew was greeting passengers. This was the sanctuary, the point where the stress was supposed to melt away into hot towels and champagne. Standing at the door was the purser, a man named Preston. Preston was tall, immaculate in his navy blue uniform, with hair gelled into a helmet of perfection and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was greeting an older couple in front of Damien. "Welcome aboard, Mr. and Mrs. Kensington. Wonderful to see you again. Let me take your coats." Preston beamed, oozing charm. Then Damien stepped forward. Preston's smile vanished instantly. It was like a shutter coming down. He stepped slightly into the aisle, physically blocking Damien's path to the left, the turn for first class. "Boarding pass?" Preston asked. It wasn't a welcome. It was a challenge. Damien held up his phone again. Preston didn't scan it. He just peered at it, squinting dramatically as if trying to spot a forgery. 1A. Preston let out a short, sharp exhale through his nose. "Right. You can take your seat. Overhead bins in first are reserved for luggage, sir. If that backpack is too bulky, you'll have to check it." "It'll fit," Damien said quietly, stepping past him. "We'll see," Preston muttered to a junior flight attendant, a young woman named Sarah, loud enough for Damien to hear. "Keep an eye on him. I don't want him bothering the other guests." Damien clenched his jaw but kept walking. He found seat 1A. It was a sweet, really leather upholstery, a lie-flat bed, a massive screen. He tossed his backpack into the overhead bin. It fit perfectly with room to spare and collapsed into the seat. He closed his eyes. Just sleep, he told himself. Ignore him. You own the company that leases these planes to Royal Atlantic. You could make a call and have this guy transferred to baggage handling in Alaska. But you're too tired. Just sleep. But Preston wasn't done. The first-class cabin was full. There were only 8 suites, and everyone was occupied. Across from Damien in 1F sat a man who looked like the archetype of a corporate shark grey suit, Rolex reading the Financial Times. Behind him were the Kensingtons the wealthy couple Preston had fawned over. The atmosphere was hushed and expensive. Preston moved through the cabin with a silver tray. On it were crystal flutes of chilled champagne, Dom Perignon, 2012. The airline's signature pour for first class. Damien watched through half-open eyes as Preston served the man in the grey suit. "Mr. Sterling," Preston purred. "Champagne to start? Or perhaps a sparkling water with a twist of lemon?" "Champagne, Preston. Keep it coming," Mr. Sterling replied with a chuckle. "Of course, sir." Preston moved to the Kensingtons. "Mrs. Kensington, lovely to have you. Champagne." "Oh, yes, please." Preston worked his way down the aisle. He served 1F2A, 2F, 3A, 3F, 4A, and 4F. He walked right past 1A. Damien waited. Maybe he was coming back. Preston walked back up the aisle, the empty tray tucked under his arm, staring straight ahead. He walked past Damien again, as if the seat were empty. Damien sat up. He was thirsty. "Excuse me," he said, raising a hand as Preston passed. Preston stopped. He didn't turn his whole body, just his head looking down his nose. "Yes?" "I didn't get a drink," Damien said calmly. "Could I get some water, please?" Preston sighed, a theatrical heave of his shoulders. "We are currently conducting the pre-flight service for our premium guests, sir. I have to prioritize the champagne service." "I am a premium guest," Damien said, his voice hardening slightly. "I'm in seat 1A. "I'm aware of where you are sitting," Preston said, his tone dripping with insinuation. "But the champagne is limited stock. I need to ensure the full-fare passengers are accommodated first before I can offer other beverages." The insult was subtle, but razor-sharp. Full fare. He was implying Damien was an upgrade, an employee using a pass, or someone who used miles, someone who didn't really pay. "I don't want champagne," Damien said. "I want water. I'll see if I can find a plastic cup once we reach cruising altitude," Preston said dismissively. "For now, please fasten your seatbelt. We are pushing back." He walked away before Damien could respond. Across the aisle, Mr. Sterling lowered his newspaper. He looked at Damien, then at Preston's retreating back, and smirked. He didn't say anything, but the look said it all. "You don't fit in, kid." Damien took a deep breath. His heart rate was climbing. This wasn't just bad service. This was targeted. He pulled out his phone. He had no signal now as the plane began to taxi, but he opened his notes app. He typed Preston, Senior Purser, Royal Atlantic Flight 882, JFK, LHR. The plane took off, roaring into the dark sky. Damien watched the lights of New York fade below. He hoped that once the seatbelt sign went off, things would normalize. 20 minutes later, the chimes dinged. The crew began the dinner service. This was Royal Atlantic's flagship route. The menu was legendary. Lobster thermidor, Wagyu beef sliders, truffle risotto. Damien's stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since a stale sandwich in a boardroom in Chicago. Sarah, the junior flight attendant, appeared with a tablecloth. She looked nervous. She laid the white linen on Damien's tray table. "Good evening, sir," she whispered. She seemed nice, but terrified. She glanced toward the galley, where Preston was rattling bottles. "Hi," Damien said. "Thanks." Preston materialized, practically shoving Sarah out of the way. He held a leather-bound menu. He handed one to Mr. Sterling. He handed one to the Kensingtons. He didn't hand one to Damien. Instead, Preston stood by Damien's seat, hands clasped behind his back. "Sir, regarding the meal service?" "Yes," Damien asked. "Unfortunately, due to a catering error at JFK, we were not loaded with enough meals for the full cabin." Preston lied. His face was smooth, practiced. "We prioritize our Diamond Medallion members and full-fare corporate accounts for meal selection." Damien looked around. "There are 8 seats. Are you telling me you don't have 8 meals?" "We have 7, Preston said, a small, cruel smile playing on his lips. "And as you are likely on a promotional ticket, I'm afraid I can't offer you the first-class menu." Damien felt the heat rise in his neck. He wasn't on a promotional ticket. He had paid $12,000 for this seat. "I paid full fare," Damien said, his voice rising just enough to turn heads. "And even if I didn't, I'm seated in first class. The service standard is the same." "Lower your voice," Preston snapped, suddenly playing the victim. "There is no need to be aggressive. I am trying to find a solution for you." "What's the solution?" Damien asked. Preston reached into the pocket of his apron and pulled out a small foil-wrapped package. He dropped it onto Damien's white linen tablecloth. It landed with a pathetic thwack. It was a bag of pretzels and a banana. "We have some snacks available from the economy galley," Preston said, "and I can bring you that water now, in a plastic cup as discussed." The cabin went silent. Mr. Sterling across the aisle chuckled audibly. "Rough break, kid. Maybe pack a lunch next time." Damien looked at the banana. Then he looked at Preston. "You're denying me a meal?" Damien asked, his voice deadly quiet. "I'm managing my inventory," Preston said. "Now, if you don't mind, Mr. Sterling is waiting for his lobster." Preston turned his back. That was it. The switch flipped. Damien didn't yell. He didn't throw the pretzels. He simply unbuckled his seatbelt. "Where are you going?" Preston barked, spinning around. "The seatbelt sign is on. I'm going to use the Wi-Fi," Damien said, calmly standing up. "And I'm going to make a phone call." "You cannot make voice calls on a plane," Preston shouted, stepping into his space. "I'm not calling my mother, Preston," Damien said, towering over the flight attendant. "I'm calling the cockpit." Preston laughed, a genuine, incredulous laugh. "You're calling the cockpit? And how do you plan to do that? Do you have the captain's cell phone number? Damien smiled. It was a cold, terrifying smile. Actually, Damien said, I do. The silence in the first-class cabin was heavy, broken only by the hum of the engines and the soft clinking of silverware from the passengers who were actually eating. Preston stared at Damien, his face a mask of incredulity. The idea that this man, this hoodie-wearing, backpack-toting nuisance, had the captain's personal contact information was so absurd to him that it circled back to being funny. The captain is flying the aircraft, sir, Preston said, his voice dripping with that specific brand of condescension reserved for toddlers and drunks. And the flight deck is a sterile environment. I'm going to ask you one last time to sit down, put your phone away, and eat your banana. If you continue to cause a disturbance, I will be forced to initiate Level 1 containment procedures. Level 1, Damien repeated, arching an eyebrow. He remained standing. You're going to write me up. Go ahead. It means, Preston stepped closer, invading Damien's personal space, that I will authorize the use of restraints. Zip ties, sir, and I will have the authorities waiting for you at Heathrow. Do you want to spend your London vacation in a holding cell? From across the aisle, Mr. Sterling groaned, wiping lobster butter from his lip with a linen napkin. For God's sake, Preston, just restrain him already. I'm trying to enjoy my thermidor. He's ruining the ambience. My apologies, Mr. Sterling, Preston said, flashing a quick apologetic smile at the businessman, before turning his glare back to Damien. You heard the gentleman. Sit down. Damien looked at Preston. He looked at the plastic flex cuffs tucked discreetly into the side of Preston's apron, meant for unruly drunks. He looked at Sarah, the junior flight attendant, who was standing by the galley curtain, chewing her lip, her eyes wide with panic. She knew this was wrong. She knew Preston was power-tripping, but she was 22, new to the job, and terrified of her supervisor. She stayed silent. Fine, Damien said. He sat down. Preston smirked a victorious curl of the lip. He thought he had won. He thought he had broken the spirit of the trespasser. Wise choice. I'll bring you that tap water now. Preston turned on his heel and marched back to the galley to continue fawning over the real passengers. Damien waited until Preston's back was turned. He didn't put his phone away. He unlocked it. He didn't have a signal, of course. They were at 30,000 feet over the Atlantic. But Damien didn't need a cell tower. He connected to the airline's Wi-Fi network. Most people paid $20 to check their emails. Damien, however, navigated to a hidden IP address. It was the back-end login for Apex Logistics' global tracking system. Since Apex owned the leasing contracts for half the planes in the sky, including the Boeing 787, he was currently sitting on his device, had a specialized administrative handshake protocol. He logged in. Welcome, Administrator Cole, Access Level Global Director. He pulled up the live telemetry for Flight 882. He could see the oil pressure, the fuel levels, and the hydraulic status. He wasn't interested in that. He navigated to the SatLink Comms tab. Usually this channel was used for maintenance crews to message pilots about technical issues. Damien tapped the message box. He didn't message the cockpit directly yet. He needed to make sure this hurt. He opened a secondary window and sent a priority communique to the ground, specifically to the personal server of Arthur Pennyworth, the CEO of Royal Atlantic Airways. It was 2:00 a.m. in London, but Arthur was an insomniac who replied to Damien's texts instantly. Damien Arthur, I'm on 882 to LHR. Your purser, Preston, just denied me a meal, called me a charity case, and threatened to zip tie me. I'm hungry. Fix it. 3 dots appeared instantly. Arthur. You're joking. You're in 1A. Damien. Yes. Wearing a hoodie. Apparently that violates his dress code. He gave my lobster to the guy in 1F. Arthur. I am looking at the crew manifest now. Senior Purser, Preston Banks, 20 years tenure. He should know better. Do you want me to call the gate in London, Damien? No. I want you to, aka RS the cockpit. Tell the captain to come out here. I want Preston to understand exactly how big a mistake he just made before we land. I don't want to wait 6 hours for justice. Arthur. Consider it done. Enjoy the show. Damien locked his phone and placed it face down on the tray table next to the sad foil-wrapped pretzels. The smell of truffle risotto wafted through the cabin. Preston was currently serving the Kensingtons, cracking fresh pepper over their plates with a flourish. Is everything to your liking, Mrs. Kensington? Preston asked. Divine, Preston. Simply divine, she replied. Preston walked back toward the front, spotting Damien. He paused. Still hungry, I found an extra packet of peanuts in the back, if the pretzels weren't enough. Mr. Sterling let out a bark of laughter. Damien just smiled. It was a calm, serene smile. No thanks, Preston. I'm waiting for the main course. I told you. Preston snapped, his patience fraying. There is no main course for you. Oh, I think there is, Damien said softly. Suddenly a sound echoed through the cabin. Ding, ding, ding. It wasn't the soft chime of a passenger call button. It was the sharp, triple-tone alarm from the cockpit. The priority interphone. Preston froze. That sound usually meant turbulence, a medical emergency, or a security threat. The color drained from his face slightly. He dropped the act of the arrogant waiter and snapped into protocol mode. He rushed to the wall-mounted phone in the galley right next to where Damien was sitting. He picked up the receiver. Flight deck, this is Preston. Damien watched Preston's face. Yes, Captain, Preston said. Then a pause. I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? Preston's eyes darted around the cabin, confused. Sir, I don't understand. A VIP, we have Mr. Sterling and the Kensingtons, but... Another pause. Preston listened. His skin, previously a healthy tan, turned the color of old parchment. He looked at the phone, then slowly, terrifyingly, his eyes swiveled toward seat 1A. Damien didn't blink. He just raised his plastic cup of water in a mock toast. Yes, sir, I understand. Immediately. Preston hung up the phone. His hand was trembling. He stood there for a moment, staring at the wall, processing the impossible instruction he had just received. Sarah, the junior flight attendant, whispered, Preston, what's wrong? Is it bad weather? Preston ignored her. He walked slowly toward Damien. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. But before he could speak, the lock on the reinforced cockpit door clicked. Thunk, hiss. The heavy door swung open. The entire first-class cabin went silent. It was rare for a pilot to emerge mid-flight and almost unheard of for the captain himself to step out during the meal service. Captain Richard Miller was a legend at Royal Atlantic. Silver-haired, broad-shouldered with 4 gold stripes on his epaulets that gleamed under the cabin lights. He carried an air of absolute authority. He stepped out of the flight deck, putting his cap on. He didn't look at Preston. He didn't look at the confused passengers. He scanned the front row. His eyes locked onto the man in the hoodie in seat 1A. Captain Miller's stern face broke into a wide, genuine grin. He stepped forward, bypassing the stunned purser, and extended a hand toward Damien. "Mr. Cole," Captain Miller boomed, his voice warm and commanding. "I had no idea you were flying with us today. Dispatch just sent me an ACARS message from the CEO himself. Why didn't you text me directly? I would have held the gate if I knew you were running late." Damien stood up. This time, Preston didn't yell at him to sit down. Preston was frozen, his mouth slightly open, looking between the captain and the trespasser. Damien shook the captain's hand firmly. "Good to see you, Richard. It was a last-minute trip. Needed to close the deal on the new cargo fleet in Frankfurt. I didn't want to bother you while you were doing pre-flight." "Nonsense," Captain Miller laughed. "It's always an honor to have the man who owns the plane on board." The silence in the cabin was now deafening. Mr. Sterling, the corporate shark in 1F, dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against his china plate. He choked on a piece of lobster. "Owns the plane." The Kensingtons exchanged horrified looks, but no one was more horrified than Preston. The blood had left his head so fast, he felt dizzy. He gripped the back of Damien's seat to steady himself. The man who owns the plane. Damien Cole. Apex Logistics. The company that had saved Royal Atlantic from bankruptcy 3 years ago by buying their fleet and leasing it back to them. Damien Cole wasn't just a VIP. He was, for all intents and purposes, the landlord. And Preston was the tenant who had just spit in his face. "So," Captain Miller said, clapping Damien on the shoulder. "How is the service? Preston taking good care of you? I know we usually stock that specific vintage of Pinot Noir you like." Damien's smile didn't reach his eyes as he looked over the captain's shoulder at Preston. "Actually, Richard," Damien said, his voice smooth but heavy with implication, "there seems to be a misunderstanding." "Oh." The captain's smile faded. He sensed the tension. He looked at the empty tray table in front of Damien. He looked at the bag of pretzels. Then he looked at Mr. Sterling's lobster. "I was told," Damien continued, staring directly at Preston, "that there was a catering error. Apparently there weren't enough meals for the full-fare passengers. So as someone Preston assumed was on a charity ticket, I was given a banana." Captain Miller turned slowly to face Preston. The warmth was gone. The captain looked like he was inspecting a faulty engine part. "Preston," Captain Miller said, his voice low and dangerous, "did we not load 8 meals?" Preston opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He squeaked. Captain, the manifest. His clothes. "Did we load 8 meals?" Captain Miller repeated louder. "Yes, sir," Preston whispered, looking at the floor. "So why is Mr. Cole eating pretzels?" I assumed," Preston stammered. He was sweating profusely now. He was wearing a hoodie. "I thought he was an upgrade. I wanted to save the meal in case a Diamond member requested a second portion." "You were saving his paid-for meal for someone else," Damien interjected calmly. "Or did you just not want to serve me?" "And," Damien added, twisting the knife, "he also refused me a glass of water and threatened to zip-tie me because I tried to check my email." Captain Miller's face turned a shade of purple that matched the sunset outside the window. This was a dismissal-level offense, not just bad service discrimination and gross insubordination against a major shareholder. "Preston," Captain Miller barked, "go to the galley, now." "But, Captain, the meal service—" "Sarah can finish the service," Miller shouted. "Get in the galley and stay there. Do not speak to another passenger. Do not touch another bottle of wine. You are relieved of duty effectively immediately. You will sit on the jump seat for the remainder of this flight." Preston looked like he was about to cry. He looked at Mr. Sterling, hoping for an ally. Sterling suddenly found the clouds outside his window very interesting and refused to make eye contact. Shamefaced Preston shuffled past them and sat on the small, uncomfortable fold-down seat by the door. He buckled himself in his career, flashing before his eyes. Captain Miller turned back to Damien, his expression apologetic. "Mr. Cole, I am deeply sorry. This is unacceptable. I will file a report the second we land. Please take my meal. The crew meal is actually the filet mignon tonight." "That's kind of you, Richard. But don't worry about it," Damien said. "Actually, there is one thing you can do." "Anything?" Damien looked at Sarah. The young flight attendant was standing by the cart, looking terrified that she was next. "Sarah," Damien said gently. She jumped. Yes, sir. You've been doing all the work while Preston walked around gossiping. You tried to be polite to me at the door," Damien said. He turned to the captain. "Richard put Sarah in charge. She's the purser now." Sarah gasped. "Me? But, sir, I'm not qualified." "You are today," Damien said. "Take the coat off Preston. You wear it." It was a breach of protocol, but Captain Miller didn't hesitate. He nodded. "You heard the man, Sarah. You're the senior purser for the duration of Flight 882. Preston, give her the jacket." In front of the Kensingtons, Mr. Sterling and the entire cabin, Preston had to unbutton his navy blazer with the gold cuff stripes. He handed it to Sarah. It was too big for her, but she put it on her face, flushed with a mix of shock and pride. "Now," Damien said, sitting back down and finally relaxing. "Sarah, if you could find that lobster thermidor that Preston was hiding, I'd love to have dinner." "Yes, Mr. Cole." "Right away. Mr. Cole." Sarah scrambled toward the oven. Captain Miller nodded once more to Damien and returned to the cockpit. The door locked. The dynamic of the cabin had shifted instantaneously. The air was different. Sterling cleared his throat. He leaned across the aisle. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a slimy, desperate attempt at networking. "Mr. Cole, was it?" Sterling asked, extending a hand. "You know, I thought there was something different about you. A man of your stature, keeping a low profile. Smart. Very smart. I'm in logistics myself, actually. Perhaps we could—" Damien didn't take the hand. He picked up his noise-cancelling headphones. "Mr. Sterling," Damien said coolly, "eat your dinner. I think you have some butter on your chin." He put the headphones on, drowning out Sterling's stammering apology. Damien ate his lobster. It was delicious, but the flight was far from over. Preston was sitting on the jump seat, fuming, his eyes burning holes into the back of Damien's head. He wasn't just defeated. He was plotting. He knew he was fired when they landed. He had nothing left to lose. And a man with nothing to lose is dangerous even at 30,000 feet. The cabin lights had been dimmed to a soothing indigo hue. The Boeing 787 was cruising silently over the dark expanse of the North Atlantic. Most of the passengers in first class had reclined their suites into fully flat beds, burying themselves under plush duvets. Mr. Sterling in 1F was snoring softly, a rhythmic, guttural sound that vibrated through the quiet cabin. The Kensingtons were asleep, holding hands across the aisle. Damien Cole, in seat 1A, had his eyes closed, his noise-cancelling headphones on. To the casual observer, he was deep in slumber. But in the galley near the cockpit door, Preston Banks was wide awake. He was sitting on the hard, punishing jump seat, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. He wasn't just angry. He was spiraling. For 20 years, Preston had curated a reputation as the gatekeeper of Royal Atlantic's elite service. He had served celebrities, politicians, and royals. He viewed himself not as a servant, but as a peer to the people in first class and a superior to everyone in economy. And now, in the span of 2 hours, he had been stripped of his jacket, humiliated by a captain he despised, and replaced by a 22-year-old girl who didn't even know how to properly decant a Bordeaux. He watched Sarah moving about the galley. She was doing a good job, too good. She was organizing the breakfast carts, quietly checking on passengers with a genuine care that Preston had never possessed. Preston knew his career was over. The moment they landed in London, Captain Miller would file a report. Damien Cole, the owner, would corroborate it. Preston would be fired for cause. He would lose his pension. He would be blacklisted from the industry. Unless Preston thought a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. Unless I can prove that Damien Cole is unstable. Unless I can prove he's a criminal. If Damien was arrested, his credibility would be shot. The media would run with the headline, "Billionaire CEO arrested for mid-air theft." The airline would go into damage control. Preston could claim he was trying to protect the passengers from a dangerous man, and that the captain had sided with the aggressor. He could spin the narrative. Preston unbuckled his seatbelt. "Where are you going?" Sarah whispered, looking up from the coffee machine. "Bathroom." Preston lied, his voice rough. "Unless I need permission for that, too." "Purser," Sarah flinched at his tone, but nodded. "Go ahead." Preston moved into the dark aisle. He didn't go to the bathroom. He stopped at seat 1F. Mr. Sterling was fast asleep, his mouth slightly open. On the side console of his suite, gleaming in the dim LED light, was his watch. It wasn't just any watch. It was a Patek Philippe Nautilus solid gold, easily worth $100,000. Sterling had taken it off to sleep a careless habit of the ultra-wealthy. Preston looked around. The cabin was a tomb. Sarah was busy in the galley with her back turned. The passengers were comatose. With a trembling hand, Preston reached out. His fingers closed around the cold metal of the watch. He snatched it. He held his breath, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He looked at Damien in seat 1A. Damien was facing the window, his back to the aisle. His backpack was sitting on the floor, the main compartment slightly unzipped from when he had retrieved his headphones. Preston moved silently like a predator. He stepped toward 1A. He crouched down. This is it, Preston thought. The equalizer. He slipped the heavy gold watch into the open pocket of Damien's battered leather backpack. He pushed it deep down under a sweatshirt. He stood up, adrenaline flooding his veins. He felt a surge of dark triumph. He wasn't just a flight attendant anymore. He was the director of this drama. He walked back to the galley, bypassing the bathroom entirely. "Feeling better?" Sarah asked, trying to be polite. "Much," Preston said, a strange, frantic glint in his eyes. "Actually, Sarah, I think I need to make a call. To the ground." "The captain said no calls," Sarah reminded him. "This is a security issue," Preston hissed. "I saw something. I need to report it before we land. If I don't, and something goes missing, it's on your head as the acting purser. Do you want to take the fall for a theft?" Sarah's eyes widened. "Theft? What are you talking about?" "Just let me use the interphone to call dispatch," Preston commanded. He bullied past her and grabbed the handset. He didn't call the captain. He called the Royal Atlantic Ground Operations security desk at Heathrow. "This is Senior Purser Banks on Flight 882. Preston whispered into the phone, his eyes locked on Damien's sleeping form. "I need to report a felony in progress, requesting airport police to meet the aircraft at the gate. Yes, we have a high-value theft. The perpetrator is in seat 1A. Yes. The CEO. He's drunk, he's aggressive, and I just witnessed him steal from another passenger. I was afraid to intervene for my own safety." He hung up the phone. A grim smile twisted his face. Preston sat back down on the jump seat. He watched the flight map on the screen. 2 hours to London. 2 hours until he destroyed Damien Cole. He didn't notice the tiny red light on the ceiling above seat 1A, and he certainly didn't notice that Damien's eyes were open, watching the reflection in the darkened window. The sunrise over Ireland was spectacular, painting the clouds in streaks of burning orange and violet. But the mood inside Flight 882 was tense. Captain Miller came over the PA system. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are beginning our initial descent into London Heathrow. The weather is a brisk 50 degrees with light rain. We ask that you return your seats to the upright position." Usually the captain would thank the crew. Usually he would make a joke. Today his voice was clipped and professional. Sarah moved through the cabin with hot towels. She looked pale. Preston had told her what he'd done, that he'd called the police. She was terrified. She looked at Damien, who was calmly drinking a cup of black coffee, reading a book on his tablet. He didn't look like a thief. He looked like a man at peace. Mr. Sterling woke up. He stretched, yawning loudly. He reached for his water glass. Then he reached for his watch. His hand patted the empty console. He frowned. He sat up straighter. He checked the floor. He checked the gap between the cushions. "Miss Wu," Sterling called out, snapping his fingers at Sarah. "Miss—" Sarah rushed over. "Yes, Mr. Sterling. My watch," Sterling said, his voice rising in panic. "It's gone. I left it right here. It's a Patek Philippe. It's gone." The cabin woke up. The Kensingtons peered over their seats. Preston unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up, ignoring the fastened seatbelt sign. He marched over, feigning shock. "Gone, sir?" Preston asked loudly. "Are you sure? I'm sure I took it off right before I went to sleep," Sterling shouted. "Someone took it." Preston turned slowly, his eyes fixing on Damien. "Well, Mr. Sterling, the cabin is secure. No one has entered or left first class, except for the passengers seated here." Damien didn't look up from his tablet. "Are you implying something, Preston?" "I'm not implying anything," Preston said, his voice trembling with fake righteousness. "But I did see someone moving around in the dark while Mr. Sterling was asleep. Someone who was wandering the aisles earlier." "You mean when I went to the bathroom?" Damien asked calmly. "You tell me," Preston sneered. "Sit down, Preston." Captain Miller's voice boomed from the cockpit. He was monitoring the cabin via the camera, though he couldn't see the specific angles of the seats. "Cabin crew, take your seats for landing immediately." "We have a theft, Captain," Preston shouted at the ceiling. "We need security." "Security is already arranged," the captain replied ominously. "Sit. Down." The plane dipped. The landing gear deployed with a heavy thud. The wheels kissed the tarmac of Heathrow's runway 27L. The reverse thrusters roared, slowing the massive beast to a crawl. As the plane taxied to the gate, the tension in first class was suffocating. Mr. Sterling was red-faced, practically vibrating with rage. "If someone stole that watch, I will sue this airline into oblivion." "Do you know who I am?" "We will handle it, sir," Preston assured him, shooting a smug look at Damien. "Justice will be served." The plane came to a halt at Gate 41. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Usually everyone jumps up to grab their bags. Today no one moved. Through the windows they could see flashing blue lights on the tarmac. 3 police cars were parked next to the jet bridge. The cabin door opened. But it wasn't the ground staff who entered. 4 officers from the Metropolitan Police boarded. 2 were uniformed constables. 2 were detectives in suits. They looked serious. Preston stepped forward, straightening his tie. He pointed an accusatory finger directly at Damien. "Officers," Preston said, his voice ringing with authority. "Thank God you're here. That man, seat 1A, Damien Cole, he is the one. I witnessed him acting suspiciously near Mr. Sterling's seat during the night. The stolen property is likely in his bag." The lead detective, a tall woman with sharp eyes named Inspector Graves, looked at Preston. Then she looked at Damien. Mr. Sterling stood up. "He has my watch. Search him. He's been a problem since we took off." Inspector Graves walked up to Damien. Damien remained seated, his hands resting calmly on his knees. "Mr. Cole?" Inspector Graves asked. "That's me," Damien said. "This crew member is accusing you of theft," Graves said. "Do you mind if we search your carry-on luggage?" "Go ahead," Damien said. He kicked his backpack into the aisle with his foot. Preston smirked. "Got him." One of the constables picked up the bag. He unzipped it. He reached in. He pulled out the sweatshirt. Then he reached deeper. His hand came out, holding the gold Patek Philippe. Mr. Sterling gasped. "My watch! I knew it! The thug stole it." Preston let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "I told you I saw him. He's a criminal." The constable handed the watch to Inspector Graves. She examined it, then looked at Damien. "Mr. Cole, you are in possession of stolen property," Graves said sternly. "You have the right to remain silent." "Arrest him," Preston crowed. "Take him off the plane in cuffs." Damien finally stood up. He stood to his full height, looming over the cabin. He didn't look scared. He looked bored. "Inspector," Damien said, "before you put those cuffs on me, I'd like you to look at something." "What?" Graves asked. "My tablet," Damien said, picking it up from the seat. "You see, I own a logistics company. Security is my business. When I travel, I run a proprietary, localized surveillance program on my devices. It uses the ambient light sensors and the cameras to detect motion in my immediate vicinity." Preston's smile faltered. "I didn't steal the watch," Damien said, tapping the screen, "but I did record the person who did." He turned the tablet around so the inspector, the Kensingtons, Mr. Sterling, and Preston could see the screen. The video was grainy shot in night vision mode, but unmistakable. On the screen, a figure in a flight attendant uniform crept into the frame. The figure reached into Mr. Sterling's pod. The figure snatched the watch. The figure crouched down and shoved the watch into Damien's open bag. Then the figure stood up, and the light from the galley hit his face. It was Preston. The silence that followed was heavier than the plane itself. Mr. Sterling's jaw dropped. "Preston." Damien looked at the flight attendant, whose face had gone a sickly ashen grey. "Preston didn't call the police to arrest a thief," Damien said, his voice cold as ice. "He called them to frame his boss because he knew he was getting fired for racism and incompetence." Inspector Graves looked at the video, then at the watch, then at Preston. "Preston Banks," Inspector Graves said, pulling a pair of handcuffs from her belt. "You are under arrest for theft, attempting to pervert the course of justice, and filing a false police report." "No," Preston shrieked, backing away. "It's a deep fake. He doctored it." "You can't believe him. The camera doesn't lie, mate," the constable said, grabbing Preston's arm and spinning him around. The click of the handcuffs echoed through the first-class cabin. "Get him off my plane," Damien said, as the police dragged a struggling, weeping Preston down the aisle, past the stunned passengers. He had spent his life serving. Damien turned to Mr. Sterling. "Here's your watch," Damien said, nodding at the inspector to hand it back. "Next time, maybe don't judge a book by its hoodie." Mr. Sterling looked at the watch, then at Damien. He looked small. He looked ashamed. "Mr. Cole, I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," Damien said, slinging his backpack over one shoulder. "Just do business with Apex Logistics. We treat everyone with respect, even the ones in suits." Damien walked to the door. Captain Miller was waiting there. "I'm sorry about the landing, Damien," Miller said. "Don't be." Damien smiled. "It was the best entertainment I've had in years. Oh, and Richard. Yes, give Sarah a raise. And a promotion. She handled herself perfectly." "Consider it done," Miller said. Damien Cole walked up the jet bridge and into the London morning, leaving behind a cabin full of people who would never, ever judge a stranger again. The arrest of Preston Banks on Flight 882 didn't just end on the tarmac. It sparked a full storm that consumed the news cycle for weeks. In the age of social media, privacy is an illusion. While Damien had remained calm, Mrs. Kensington, the very woman Preston had fawned over, had quietly pulled out her phone the moment the police boarded. She recorded the entire interaction, the accusation, the search, the reveal of the video evidence, and the handcuffs clicking around Preston's wrists. By the time Damien Cole stepped out of Heathrow Terminal 5, the video was already trending on X, formerly Twitter, and TikTok under the hashtag #FirstClassFraud. Within 4 hours, it had 12 million views. The image of the sneering purser being dragged away weeping became an instant meme of instant karma. But for Preston, the nightmare was only beginning. The Metropolitan Police didn't stop at the watch. Inspector Graves, suspicious of Preston's frantic behavior and the practiced nature of the theft, obtained a warrant for his flat in Kensington. What they found turned a simple theft case into a major criminal investigation. Hidden in a false bottom of Preston's wardrobe was a trove of high-value items: diamond earrings, loose currency from a dozen countries, designer sunglasses, and 3 other luxury watches. It turned out that Preston Banks had been supplementing his income for over a decade by preying on wealthy sleeping passengers who trusted the uniform. He had gotten away with it for years because he always targeted people who were intoxicated or forgetful, gaslighting them into thinking they had lost their items themselves. Damien Cole wasn't just a victim. He was the first person smart enough to catch a predator who had been operating in the skies for 15 years. The trial was swift and brutal. Royal Atlantic Airways, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal, provided the prosecution with every roster and flight log Preston had ever worked. The catering error, lie, was exposed as a malicious act of discrimination. Standing in the dock at Isleworth Crown Court, Preston looked nothing like the arrogant gatekeeper of Row 1. He looked shrunken and defeated. The judge, citing the breach of trust and the malicious attempt to frame an innocent passenger, showed no leniency. Preston was sentenced to 4 years in prison. He lost his pension, his reputation, and his freedom. The man who wouldn't serve water to a man in a hoodie was now drinking tap water in a cell. But the karma didn't stop with Preston. Mr. Sterling, the corporate shark who had laughed at Damien and then tried to network with him, faced a different kind of justice business execution. 2 weeks after the flight, Apex Logistics, Damien's company, announced a review of its supply chain partners. Mr. Sterling's firm, Sterling Freight, relied on Apex for 40% of its shipping contracts. Damien didn't scream. He didn't sue. He simply sent a standard form letter to Sterling Freight, stating that their contract would not be renewed due to misalignment of core values. Mr. Sterling tried to call. He tried to visit the headquarters. He was blocked at the front desk by a security guard who ironically was wearing a hoodie. Sterling Freight's stock plummeted 18% the following quarter. Mr. Sterling was eventually voted out by his own board of directors for failure to maintain key strategic relationships. He learned the hard way that in the modern world, character is a currency, and he was bankrupt. And then there was Sarah. The young flight attendant who had been terrified to speak up became the face of the airline's redemption. Damien Cole kept his word. He personally commended her to the CEO of Royal Atlantic. Sarah wasn't just promoted, she was fast-tracked. She became the youngest customer experience director in the airline's history. She spearheaded a new training program titled TOR, the Cole Standard, which emphasized that every passenger, whether they wore a bespoke suit or a university hoodie, deserved dignity, respect, and equal service. 6 months after the incident, Damien Cole was flying again. He was on Royal Atlantic, headed to Tokyo. He walked onto the plane wearing a comfortable tracksuit and carrying his battered backpack. The flight crew didn't sneer. They smiled genuinely. "Welcome back, Mr. Cole," the new purser said. "We have your meal ready, and seat 1A is waiting." Damien smiled back. He sat down, put on his noise-cancelling headphones, and looked out the window. The system had been broken, but he had fixed it. Not with anger, but with the undeniable power of the truth. As the plane lifted off, leaving the grey runway behind, Damien closed his eyes. He finally got some sleep. What happened to Preston wasn't just bad luck. It was the inevitable result of a lifetime of judging others based on appearance. Damien Cole proved that true power doesn't need to shout, and it certainly doesn't need to wear a suit. It walks quietly, carries the receipts, and strikes when the time is right. This story is a powerful reminder that the person you mistreat today could be the one holding your fate tomorrow. In a world obsessed with status, character remains the only thing that truly matters. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder not to judge a book by its cover. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story. I'll see you in the next one.